Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for registering to our webinar about the enrichment scheme. We have received quite a lot of RSVPs for the webinar today, and we are very, very excited about all of the interest that we have seen in the scheme. So thank you so much. My name is Anna Bermani, and I am the Academic Recruitment Coordinator at the Alan Turing Institute. Before we start with the webinar, I just want to make sure that you guys can see me and hear me. If you are having any technological issues, any problems, so please do drop a message, a comment on the Q&A box that you see here below, and we will take care of it. We will help you fix the problem. While we wait for the last few attendees to join us, I see quite a lot of people joining us as we speak. I wanted to let you know that the webinar today will be divided in two parts. We will start with a presentation, and then we will have plenty of time. We will leave you plenty of space for you to ask any questions. To ask your questions, I would like to invite you to type your questions in the Q&A box that you see below. I will keep an eye on this box and make sure that all your questions get answered. Just so you know, you can also upvote, sort of like the questions that other people have entered in the box. So that we know that multiple people would like to receive an answer to that specific question. So that helps us make sure that we answer all your questions. I see that a few more people are joining us. Just want to make sure that everybody is here before we start. But just so you know, we're going to record the webinar, and we will send a link to the recording via email. So you will receive an email with this link right after the webinar. For those of you, well, for those who did not have the chance to RSVP and attend the webinar today, they will be able to watch the recording as well, just by visiting the Enrichment Scheme webpage on our Alan Turing Institute website. All right, I see there's quite a lot of people already joined, and I think we're ready to start. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenters today, starting with Dr. Ben Murton, our Head of Academic Programs. Welcome, Ben. Hi, Ben. Ben is joined by our training officer, Mishka Nemes. Nemes, I think I'm pronouncing your last name the right way.
Nemes.
Nemes, yes. Sorry about that. And today we also have a special guest joining us, our former enrichment student, Beatriz Costa Gomes. I hope the pronunciation is the correct one.
It's great, thank you.
Fantastic, welcome Beatriz. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and I would like to move on and introduce the topics that we're gonna discuss today in the webinar. So I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with the Alan Turing Institute, but for those who are not, we will give you a quick introduction before we move on to talk about the scheme and what is new in the 2021 call. We will talk about the enrichment student and the type of candidate that we're looking for. We will talk about the benefits and the training activities that we offer with the scheme, training activities and collaboration opportunities as well. We will have a space for Beatriz to share a little bit about her experience. She participated in the 2019 enrichment scheme. And after that, we'll go over the application process. That is really easy and straightforward, but we will touch base on that. And then we will have plenty of time for you to ask any questions. And just keep in mind, I will check the Q&A box and make sure that all your questions get answered. And now on to you, Ben, with the first part.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. It's lovely to see over 80 people on this call to find out some more. We are, of course, as everyone says, very sorry that we can't be hosting some of you in the Institute itself to explain a little bit about the scheme today. But I think that we will hopefully be able to convey to you why we love this scheme at the Turing, why we're excited about it, and be able to answer your questions so that you may feel enabled to apply to it and then benefit from the enrichment scheme. For those of you that maybe aren't so aware, the Alan Turing Institute was set up in 2015 as the UK's National Research Institute for Data Science Research, and then in the end of 2017 had artificial intelligence added to its remit as well. And the Institute itself has a number of major missions. Obviously, research is at the core of what we do. And there's this real belief that I'm sure all of you would agree that to try and answer the biggest questions that are emerging in science and society and economy, we need to have a data science approach to be able to move forward with many of them. And we have seen some of the advantages of that approach, particularly as we've been looking at the research coming off the back of this recent pandemic. But in order to do data science well, I think we also understand that we need to do collaboration and make sure that universities for their research expertise, but also businesses for their domain problems that they need answering, and indeed into the public sector and government spheres as well, all have challenges that can be met through data science and the application of artificial intelligence as well. And so it's coupling up that kind of core research with the applied research that the Institute is particularly keen on doing. We also have this remit of training the leaders of the future. And that means making sure that we have a generation of people who are rising up, who understand how to do data science and artificial intelligence, understand what can be done and the limits on what should be done. And that is particularly where the enrichment scheme starts contributing through the training of doctoral students. And the reason that we want to bring those together is because ultimately the Institute wants to make sure it's leading the public conversation in the UK and internationally through these emerging questions that we have relating to data science and AI. If I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. There we are, one in the middle. So the enrichment scheme itself has become our flagship scheme at the Turing, and I really want to emphasize how it has grown in the last few years, and we've committed to making sure that this is something that stands out amongst what we're doing. The scheme itself is offered now on a part-time or full-time basis, and this year we're able to offer placements that are 6, 9, or 12 months in length. And that has increased. Originally, it was only annual placements that we were offered, and it was only to 15 people. But we've tried to increase the flexibility with which we offer these engagements. The 3 start dates that we're able to offer for the 2021 round are starting in October 2021, and then January and March in 2022. The only slight caveat there is if you decide to start in March 2022, the longest placement you can take is 9 months. So everyone will be finished by Christmas 2022 that starts in this recruitment round. The other really exciting thing this year is that the Turing is expanding the scope of the enrichment scheme to not just be based in the Turing offices in the British Library in the centre of London, but also offer sort of remote locations from that point. And these are at the Leeds Institute for Data Analytics, LIDA, at the University of Leeds, and the Jean Golding Institute at the University of Bristol. And these are 2 of our university partners who have agreed to take on smaller cohorts, but still probably 10 to 15 people working at those centres, so that you can experience that coming together that the enrichment scheme gives, but in a different environment that may be particularly suitable for those more interested in part-time schemes who will find it easier to commute to one of those sites than London, or those that just want to form a particular collaboration with one of the data science or AI experts in those locations. And really, if you want to know what the enrichment scheme is, it's actually one of these well-named schemes. It is there to enrich doctoral education. It's not replacing your PhD. It's not necessarily significantly shifting the project, but it's there to just bring you more in what you're doing and make it a more valuable time during your doctoral training so that you can go on to greater things in the future. If I could have the next slide. So at the heart of the enrichment is our sort of triangle diagram. I love simple diagrams, so this is about as simple as it gets. Ultimately, we think as an institute, we're trying to prepare ethical leaders of tomorrow in data science and AI. So that is at the heart of almost everything we do. But over the years, we've been able to refine what we offer and highlight three main areas that I think stand out. So the first of those is methodology. You may be coming to the Institute because you would like to learn some data science and AI methods that perhaps you haven't been able to integrate yet into your doctoral studies in your home departments. And that could be because you don't have the experts around if your department is quite a narrow focus, or just perhaps because you just don't know yet who or what method you want to do, and therefore you want to broaden your scope. The second aspect, which of course is related to that, is on collaboration. So it's not just about learning more techniques, but it's about learning to work with others. You do not need to be an expert in everything, but you do need to know who to work alongside. And the collaboration aspects are one of the most exciting bits of work that the Turing comes up with. And often these will start, in previous times to this last year, by people hanging around in the kitchen, talking, realizing that they could come together and work on a project. And they are really exciting things that emerge. And then there are also more formal ways to start getting involved with the research programs as well. That might be something that you do while on enrichment that might continue into the future as well. The final aspect that we like to promote that some group leaders are a little bit more nervous about is the opportunity to gain some independence. And I think this is really important for data scientists. We have a number of students who've turned up to do enrichment coming from departments that have quite a narrow way of doing their research. And by perhaps towards the end of your PhD, coming away and doing an enrichment scheme, being based at the Turing or one of the university partners that's on offer this year, gives you an opportunity to just test out new things and new ways of doing your research that you might not have the independence or flexibility to do in your home department. And we think that all of these things coming together really do prepare you to sort of take on a leading role in data science in the future. So who are we looking for? I think that it's been increasingly clear over the years that there is not a typical Turing student that we are looking for. So there are some commonalities to that. You need to have a background in some kind of data science or artificial intelligence, and that's so that you could engage with others within that community. And so it's not a fixed prerequisite, and the levels of that expertise might vary from university to university and student to student. But we expect you to be able to come in and engage with a cohort of like-minded and like-thinking people as well. But we do have a very broad range of academic disciplines represented in the enrichment population and the Turing's doctoral students as well, from lawyers through to astrophysicists, from theoretical mathematicians through to classicists. And we've had all of these people coming together and being able to interact with one another on the scheme. So don't think for a minute that there is a typical kind of student from a maths, stats, computer science background. We are much broader and more inclusive on the academic front as well. The one fixed requirement is that you are enrolled at a UK university undertaking doctoral studies and that you are supported by your supervisor. We want to make sure that you coming away and working at the Turing or one of its partners does not cause any great tensions within your PhD projects, as you can imagine. That is not good for anyone. So we do need to make sure that your universities are supportive. And also, we would love you to be in the active research phase. And this is a term which is quite hard to define, especially in the current climate we find ourselves in. What that means is we would love people who are actually doing research. The enrichment scheme is not something, if you're just doing the writing up, where you should just come and sit in a different office and get on with your writing up, because then you won't be kind of contributing into those collaborations and developing those new methodologies. But we understand that because of the disruption from the pandemic, the timetables on a typical PhD may have shifted somewhat. And some of you may well have got a lot of your writing up done before the kind of traditional writing up period towards the end of your doctoral studies. And therefore, we've asked you in the application forms to think for yourselves whether you're eligible and whether you are actively in that research phase, or will be in October 21 or whenever you choose to start, or whether it's not actually quite the right opportunity. As part of those two kind of criteria, we will need to see a valid right to study in the UK. But if you're enrolled on a doctoral scheme in the UK, then of course you should have one of those. If I can have the next slide up. So what are the benefits of the scheme? Well, I think I'd really like to emphasize to you that the benefits are what we've discussed before. It's that opportunity to interact with others, to develop your independence, collaborations, and new methodologies. But there are some practical benefits as well. First of all, if you get accepted on the scheme, you will get a stipend top up. This is about £6,700 if you're based in London, and £5,200 based in Leeds and Bristol. And this is calculated as the difference between a Turing studentship and a UKRI standard studentship. So the amount of top up that you get is dependent on what your current studentship levels are. And we can clarify that for individuals as you start applying. There's a full induction, which will be done remotely in part, and also locally, depending on where you're based. And that's to make sure that although there will be 3 cohorts in Bristol, in Leeds, and in London, you will also be part of one singular cohort, and you will be able to interact with one another. Every enrichment student will get a laptop provided by the Turing. This is a research quality laptop. And along with that, access to the Azure cloud computing options that the Turing has. And there will also be, I should imagine, local provision at Leeds and Bristol as well in the computing space. The Enrichment Scheme Award also has travel money. This is if you need to go back and visit your home university, or you would like your supervisor to come and visit you in the Turing or one of the remote sites. And there is a training and a conference fund available as well. The conference fund has been especially popular in the last few years. If you end up doing some extra work as part of your enrichment that you wouldn't have done otherwise, and need to go and present that at a conference but don't have other money available, there is up to £400 for that. And that has been a very popular option for some of our students to be able to go to an additional conference and present the work that the Turing has enabled them to do. For some students, there will be an access fund that will be relevant. And this is particularly to help those who may be facing barriers to engaging with the enrichment scheme. That might be that you have caring needs, or you may have a disability that will make it hard. And so on the scheme application form, there is a section where you can apply for consideration on that as well. And I really would, as most schemes these days, encourage you to do that if that would be of help. All of those will be sensitively reviewed by the team. And these aspects to do with Access Fund won't contribute to the evaluation of the quality of your application. Those things are treated independently. So if you do feel that that would help, we really would encourage you to fill in that section on the form as well. While you're on the scheme, there's an extensive training program in place, which Mishka will fill you in on in a minute. There are also lots of events and seminars running in the life of the Turing when we hopefully are back to normal sometime in 2021. And of course in the partner universities that will be hosting as well. And finally, in each of those remote sites and in Turing, there is a student services pastoral support team who will be around and available to support you while you're going through what I think is quite a brave thing to do, to move your doctoral location and to try something new. But we want to really make sure that you really get the most out of that experience. So I think now I'm going to pass on to Mishka, who's our training officer, who will just highlight briefly for you some of the things that we've planned in terms of the training space, and she'll also be able to help answer questions on that later on as well. So Mishka, over to you.
Thank you, Ben. So in terms of training, we have a number of training streams that will be available to you. And you can consider pretty much every single training activity also a collaboration opportunity to meet other people. We have some flagship courses. So we have in-house expertise in research software engineering, in reproducibility, ethics, and open research. For those who haven't heard about Turing Way, I suggest that you check it out. It is a community and guidebook to enable researchers implement ethical and open research in their studies. We have more technical training, and this will be done both synchronously as events, but also through online courses. And this spans like a number of methodological and research areas in data science and AI. We also have funds, and we encourage the students to self-organize themselves to have training or collaboration activities. So for instance, in the past year, we've had student talks every week or every other week. And these have gone really well, or a research showcase where students have presented posters. And then there are also activities offered to the whole cohort. So this can include things like doctoral days, where students get together to discuss matters that are specific to being a PhD student. We also have interest groups, and these are put together by different members of the Turing community. They're very specific, and you'll have an opportunity to take part in any that you're interested in. I can probably go on more here, but if there are specific questions, I'm happy to answer those. And I'm very happy to say that this year we are putting together fairly cohesive training syllabus that you will definitely benefit in the next year. Can you go to the next slide? Okay.
Add at that point that obviously originally a lot of this was done in-house at the Institute's headquarters. What we're planning to do is, for some of these activities, they'll be online, and so all three cohorts will be able to come together on them, particularly the kind of highlight courses, the software engineering, the ethics, and the open research. But then there will be local provision as well that will be done in person. And that travel fund, assuming we're allowed to travel around the country at some point during the next academic year, would enable you to be able to go to those events at any of the sites as well. And that would be an acceptable use of those funds.
Thank you, Ben. So we here have B. B is a 2019 enrichment student.
Hello.
About 6 months ago. You're also a student rep.
Yes, I was very busy in my time at the Turing. I did a lot of things. So first, hi everyone, and do apply. The enrichment scheme was really, really good for my PhD and for my personal growth in general. So just
Great to hear. We're very happy to have you here. So B, if I asked you to describe the enrichment scheme in one word or one sentence, if one word is too hard, what would you say?
If I had to do it in one word, Ben already said it, that enrichment is a very good word. It's actually very descriptive of what the scheme is. And I found it, I think it's not just academically enrichment, but in all sorts of contacts and the way you connect with people. And as I said, I felt I actually had some personal growth during my time at Turing. So I think it just enriches a lot. Yeah.
That's good. How do you feel your time at the Turing has enriched you particularly? Or what was your favorite thing?
That's a difficult thing, because as I said, I did a lot of things. And one of my favorites was actually in the first couple of months, I did Bright Club, which is stand-up comedy with the Turing. And it was a lot of fun. But on a more recent note, I'm doing the podcasts, for example, which means that I get to chat with a lot of scientists and people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. So from this is to say that I even got a chapter for my thesis that I'm currently writing. It's not a lot of fun. That I got a full chapter that I actually did during my time at the Turing with a collaboration that I wouldn't have had otherwise with a professor from Birmingham. Oh, because I'm in Manchester. So that's a lot of things, actually.
That's amazing. So you are still keeping in touch with the Turing community through the Turing podcast at the moment, and some.
Yes. I'm one of the co-hosts. I was reeled in as a guest in April, but I chat a lot, and that's apparently a good thing for a podcast. So they invited me back, and I'm still doing the podcast for now. Yeah.
That's great. And for the attendees, you can check out the Turing podcast. I think we're in the second season now. There are about like 15, 20 episodes with Turing people. So be a good introduction. And is there one thing that you would recommend prospective applicants to take advantage of if they're appointed?
Besides the coffee machine, which is, I'm surprised no one has mentioned the coffee machine. There's an infinite coffee machine, guys. It's very good for your caffeine levels. Just take advantage of the community. It was so, it was only 6 months, right? So it shouldn't have been an experience that would have been so involving, but it really was. The community was very open. Everyone was very open to collaborate, to chat, to have board games, to have random discussions about anything. When I say anything, there's actually a group that people from completely different areas published a paper on drug consumption in the dark web, which started in the kitchen in the Turing. So you guys can see that it just can take you anywhere. So just take advantage. And also, so my time at the Turing ended at the end of March, which I don't know if you guys know, but there's a pandemic around, and that was at the beginning of the pandemic. And what happened was that no one actually knew what was happening, and no one knew what was going to be like, how long it would be. But the Turing support was amazing with us. We were kept in the community until September with our laptops working, with access to emails, to everything, to the point where we did the research showcase actually in September. So it just provided us a way to just keep in touch for all of those months of lockdown and uncertainty. And it was such a difficult thing. And I'm really, really grateful that the Turing acted the way they did.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Vi. So you're saying that essentially most of the collaborations happen around the coffee machine.
Yes, it's a beacon of the social interactions of the Turing. If I were to say, it's I think it's quite thing. Oh, and I just wanted to mention something. Activities that we can also do that are completely different is actually outreach. Because, for example, I did Christmas workshops where we presented and explained artificial intelligence to the audience in the Christmas markets. So we have the opportunity to actually talk with people, and there's also all of the women. The British Library did a lot of things about women in science, which was also really cool. So that's it. Sorry.
No, that's great. I forgot to question that. Yeah, there will be lots of opportunities for public engagement and outreach, and our communications team is trying to engage the students even more into that stage. It's great to hear that you benefited. Anna, would you like? Thank you, B.
Thank you.
I'm sure you will be able to answer some questions from a student perspective that come up. Anna, would you like to take over?
Absolutely. By the way, the coffee machine, I haven't had the chance to try it, but it's on my list. I'm ready. As soon as the office opens, I'm there.
you just go straight to the, like, I will describe it for you guys to see. I don't know if you've had the description of it, but it's an iPad that comes out sometimes it's in, but it's so used that it's always out. And then there's like a tap, and then you press what you want and you put a mug. Well, you better put the mug under the tap, because otherwise it's just gonna, you know, spend all of the coffee. But yes, that's the point. And then you just have a coffee, and the mugs are really cool. Maybe, you know, you guys can convince the Turing to give mugs at the end to students. Just
let's not suggest things. Thank you, Bea. We're gonna move on to the application process side of things. The application process is very, very easy. You guys will be able to apply online via our applications portal called FlexiGrant. If you visit our enrichment scheme webpage, you will find a button, a link that will forward you to the FlexiGrant, this page here that you see on the slide. You will need to register. And once you're registered, you will be able to visualize the application form. Everybody knows this. If you don't know, now you know. The deadline is the 2nd of February, so keep this in mind. You will need to submit your applications by noon on that day. We will not be able to accept any late applications. Once you're registered and you visualize the application form, you will be asked to provide 2 references. This is very important. I invite you to take care of the references right away, as soon as possible. You will need to provide 1 reference from your supervisor. The first reference will be from the supervisor, and the second one will be from a referee who can provide a academic reference from you, for you. It's really easy. Once you see the application form, you will be able to type the referee's contact details, invite the supervisor and referee and the other referee to complete a reference form. They should keep an eye on their inboxes. They will receive an email from FlexiGrant, an automatic email. And in that email, there will be a link where you can click and just complete the form online on the portal. If they have any questions, any problems completing the reference, please invite them to reach out to us at the contact us at academic-recruitment@turing.ac.uk, and we will be able to help them. Once you complete all the categories, all the sections of the application form will say 100% complete at the top of the page, the last page. Please make sure that once you see 100% complete, you scroll down until the end of the page, that last page, and you click on submit. There will be a button that appears at the very bottom that says submit application. Make sure that you click on that button so that the application is actually submitted. You will be surprised to know how many people do not realize that there's actually a button that you need to press to submit the application, and they end up never submitting their application even if they completed it. So please make sure that you do that. In February, after the deadline, we will begin the reviewing process. The reviewing process will start with reviewing your applications against the eligibility criteria, and then we will have a second stage, a longer stage, in which we will review every single application that will remain in the scheme. We will not invite candidates for interviews, so do not expect an email from us to request an interview with us. So just sit and wait, and we will we'll communicate the outcomes by the end of May. So just to recap and really just to point you towards, again, the enrichment scheme webpage on the Alan Turing Institute website. You will find all the information, everything that we discussed today. If you happen to have any other questions after the webinar today, please do reach out to the academic recruitment team at the academic-recruitment at turing.ac.uk. You can also give me a call at 0203 862 3360 to discuss any questions that you may have, any issues. So feel free to use the number as well. And if you have time also, we have some social media. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I see a lot of questions coming in. So I think it's about time to answer a few questions. Let's have a quick look here. So I think there was a question about the recording, but we already answered that at the beginning. Just to mention, well, to repeat, you will receive an email with a link to the recording. Check out the inbox, the email that you used to register for the webinar. And you will also find a link to the recording on the enrichment scheme webpage in case you don't, for some reason, you don't see the email. We have a question about final year PhD students. Is the scheme appropriate for final year PhD students, or is it more suitable for those earlier in the doctoral study, in their doctoral studies? And this is quite popular. Quite a lot of people would like to hear an answer.
Is it okay if I answer that one?
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of questions around this, like for the start of your programs and the end of your programs as well. So I would say, starting with the end, as it were, is definitely a suitable scheme for those in the final year of their PhD. And the reason it can be particularly useful towards the end of your PhD is because you've often got up to speed with your research, and therefore what you're looking to do as you progress through your PhD is to stretch those boundaries, to form new interconnections with people, and possibly look for that extra chapter or that extra paper, or perhaps even that extra collaboration that will lead on to a postdoctoral job or an opportunity in the future. So definitely, if you are looking to expand, spending the final year of your PhD can be a very valuable experience. But at the same time, it's always like you need to make the decision. Are you able to spend that amount of time away from your home university? Because there is going to be a disruption to that supervisory relationship, although perhaps you've learned to work remotely with your supervisor in the last year, and therefore that might not be quite as intense. So definitely think about it for the end of your PhD. In terms of the first year, like when you become eligible, we'd like you to come with a project that you are settled into. And that is why we say that we would expect people to have finished the first year of research on their project before they arrive at the Turing. So at the moment, you could be in your first year and you can apply now, but we would expect you to have gone through your whole first year of research by the time you arrive. So that might be in October or into January and March in 2022. If your first year of your PhD is predominantly a rotations year or a training year, and you haven't been working on your core project, so if you're part of a CDT and you've just been doing mainly kind of learning training up until this point, then it's probably the best thing to do to wait until you have settled into your main doctoral project. And again, the reason is if you haven't got a kind of core project that you're working on, it becomes quite hard to kind of enrich it in any way. So don't see the Turing enrichment year as a year of general training. Imagine it more as a year to take the project that you're already established on and really sort of turbocharge it, rather than just kind of, it's not a great place to start off in a brand new primary project at that point. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context on those questions.
Great, thank you, Ben. We have a question about section 5 of the application form. That's the one about the research statement. Does that refer to our overall PhD project, or shall we go into more detail on what research we would like to undertake during the scheme in particular? This is quite a popular question.
What a great question. And I would probably say the answer to that is that you should try and highlight why the enrichment scheme is going to be a benefit to you. And I think there was a question later on as well about what makes a application stand out. Now, what we want to see is someone that's thought carefully about why the Turing's enrichment and why the opportunities of the enrichment scheme are going to benefit their doctoral research and what they're hoping to get out of that. That isn't necessarily a great long list of people that you're going to definitely collaborate with, because you may not have those connections yet and you may not have built those opportunities. But we want you to think carefully about what this opportunity offers that just continuing your PhD at your home university wouldn't at that point. And that's almost like the ethos of the Institute. You know, how is the Turing adding value to the work that's already excellent and already going on in those university contexts? So hopefully that sort of gives you a bit of a focus that I would say is not just your overall PhD, but you need to be sort of going into a little bit more detail on what will specifically the Turing enrichment scheme bring as a benefit if you were to be accepted.
We have a question about the references. Is it suitable to provide a secondary PhD supervisor as your second reference, or should it be a reference from a master course studies? I'm gonna take this question and answer yes. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but I believe we can accept a secondary supervisor as a second referee. Okay, we have a really good question. So where did it go? We have a lot of questions coming in. A really good questions about the different locations. So what are the other so there are 3 locations. What are the other possible factors affecting the choice of location? And is there any information available on research themes at each location?
Yeah, so each location will try and offer a kind of consolidated enrichment experience. But the enrichment scheme itself is extraordinarily flexible. And I think this is sort of what Bea was getting at in her description, that a lot of what you make of the enrichment scheme is what you make of the enrichment scheme. So it's all of these kind of connections are not served up for you, and you won't be introduced to everyone. You'll be expected to kind of throw yourselves into that community. So that wherever you are, that's going to be part of the process of going through the enrichment scheme itself. There are going to be slight differences at those remote sites. I call them remote sites because I'm based in London, but I should really say that they're all kind of going to be treated as equally as possible throughout. So what considerations? The university sites will be able to offer a little bit more kind of connection to individuals. And because we're working with smaller groups of the Turing Fellows in those locations, Bristol and Leeds have been able to get in touch with those fellows and find out who is particularly interested in having an enrichment student kind of connected to them for the duration of that enrichment scheme. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do a project for that person. You're not working for them, you're working on your PhD, but there will be probably closer ties with individual academics within those universities at Bristol and Leeds than there will be at the Turing, where we don't have any real people on site, but people come and visit all the time. The other thing to consider is the cohorts will be different sizes. So I would imagine, well, we'd hope that the cohorts in Bristol and Leeds will be 10 to 15 people, and they'll be integrated into other CDTs and training programs that are running in those places. Whereas the cohort in London will probably be 45 to 50 people. So there will be a bigger cohort of students. And there will be advantages to both of those approaches. So really, we are piloting this approach this year for the first time. And it would be great to get feedback from you as you're applying as to what you'd be looking for in those places. But then also, as we go through the year, we'll learn a lot about this as well. So I think they'll be really successful, but what they end up being will be sort of shaped by those who decide to engage with those locations as well.
Another popular question is about formal data science training. So a few people are saying that they have a background in different subjects. It could be medicine, it could be, I took a note of another question, cognitive science, human-computer interaction, but they may not have a formal training in data science. Is this a problem? You did mention a little bit about this before, but we might want to reassure them.
Yeah, this is a really tricky question to answer, and it's not going to be a one size fit all, because the type of student we've got coming in as well, if you're, I don't know, a law student doing a law PhD and interested in doing a project on ethics, then your level of understanding that you require for that is going to be very different from someone who's actually writing AI code and expecting to get that working in real world applications. So I think what you need is to be able to demonstrate that you've got the necessary skills to complete the research direction that you're hoping that you will benefit from at the Turing. So if your background is in medicine and you sort of write in your application, I don't know anything about data science and I'd just like to learn something, that's not going to be that strong an application. But if you're able to say, actually, over the years, I've done these courses, I've learned this myself, I've started trying to apply it to my research, and now I want to take that to the next level, that is going to describe to us that you are ready to kind of come into that collaborative environment. So Mishka, I don't know if you can offer a little bit from the training perspective, particularly around like interaction with the courses that we've got and how your experience has been there. And then maybe B, perhaps you can offer some perspective from people from your cohort and how they all found it as well.
Sorry, the question is like interaction on the courses, as in?
Like what kind of prerequisites are we looking for?
Okay, sorry. So most of them will require some programming knowledge if they have a hands-on element. There, I would say very, very few are actually requiring quite advanced skills. Most of them would be more introductory. With some of them, like workshops would be probably like half a day to a day, and they're rarely like prerequisite requirements. And then longer courses or summer schools, most often they literally just require some understanding of statistics, probability, or programming. Kind of depends on the course. What did you experience, B, from the courses you took?
So I feel that we had so many different backgrounds, and we all ended up doing some of the same workshops, but you don't need any specific knowledge most of the time, like you said, Mishka, but that if you need it, you also, like, if you are quite advanced, there will also be workshops for your that you can apply to, that are for more, or talks or interest groups where you can be and read papers and be with people that are more advanced in the field. But it's not a necessary thing. I actually think some of my cohort colleagues didn't have almost any programming skills when they started. So there's that, yeah.
Yeah, I know for sure that there are some people who came from like more of a humanities or law background, and they kind of started from scratch and they got up to speed. But I forgot to mention that interest groups and some reading groups are probably the most advanced training that you can get, and these are like self-organized with the researchers who are quite senior most often.
Great. We have a few questions about the references. I see a few of you are asking if both references need to be submitted by the deadline, and the answer is yes. We cannot accept your applications if you're not completed all the sections, and if you have not submitted if your referees have not submitted the references. So please do chase them, make sure that they complete the references. And I also noticed another one regarding the I missed the application process. I don't see it now, but I will reply to it later on. There was a really good question about the locations again. Are we expected to live near the locations and coming to the labs every day? Is there any help in finding temporary accommodation? Or can we work remotely and come to the location in person twice a week or so?
Do you want me to answer this one?
Yeah.
Or I think the idea of the enrichment is that we would like people to be there, to interact with one another. And as B has sort of highlighted, and as we have seen many years in a row now, it is a lot of that informal chatter that is so important. And actually, that is what has been missing this year as we've moved to a more remote model. So we would like you to be there. And I think there's a question about like specifying how many days you want to do that as well. The expectation is that if you say you're going to do 2 days a week, then that you're in for 2 days a week. And if you say you're going to do 5, then you'd be in all the time as well. There is advice provided by the Turing itself in London on being able to find accommodation that's suitable to do an enrichment. And there will be similar services available in Bristol and Leeds as well. The way the part-time structure works, and I think this is explained in the FAQs, and we will just double check it's gone up there, but in effect, if you're coming for like 1 or 2 days a week, then we expect your stipend top up to be used for that commuting cost. Whereas if you're actually going to be based in a location, that stipend top up is used to cover your kind of costs of having to move and be in a different place at that time. And that's why it's a slightly higher weighting for those coming to London. So yes, if you wanted sort of the summary at the moment, the expectation is that enrichment is a face-to-face option, and that is what we're working towards. We will keep exploring remote options in the future, but we really do feel at the moment that this is one of those programs that does benefit from those face-to-face interactions.
Can I just say something about, because from the fact that I had to go and move from Manchester to London for 6 months. And for everyone that is from outside of London, yes, things are as expensive here as people say, probably even more. Also, as soon as you get your acceptance, check places, because the biggest problem for 6 months for the 6-month enrichment students was finding places that would do a 6-month contract. So just be aware of that is a thing that we're kind of, you know, it's the sort of thing that then just hits you in the face when you get to the point. Yeah, sorry for interrupting.
Absolutely. We have a question about the online application. This person submitted their application last year, but it was incomplete because it was missing a reference. Do I consider myself as previously applied applicant or not? There is a question in the application form that asks whether you applied for the scheme before. Well, the answer is yes. You will see that underneath we ask whether you're from the you applying to the 2020 for the 2020 scheme. If that's the case, then you should not continue the application. But other than that, you would answer yes to that question, and then you move on to the following section. There's a question about the length of the placements. So yes, the placements are 6, 9, or 12 months long. Is it easier to be accepted for 6 or 12 months? I wouldn't say it's necessarily easier to be accepted. The length of the placement doesn't really matter when it comes to whether it's easy or not. Just write a really good research project, and that will be what it will impress us, not the length. But unless there's anything else to add to this.
Maybe I could add a little bit on that. If you say you need a year, then have you sort of explained why you need a year? And I think there have been some applications in the past where we're not entirely sure that the type of work or the type of enrichment that someone is looking for, they actually need a whole year to do that. And that doesn't look quite so good on the form. The other real kind of reason for considering less is, what do you intend to do towards the end of that? So if you know you're going to be away at conferences, hopefully in the summer of 2022, and you're not going to be around, then there's not much point being based in an enrichment scheme at that point. So it is to offer you the flexibility to say, actually, you know what, 6 months is enough to come in, hopefully do this collaboration and then move on. And you might just want to highlight that in your form, but you won't get positive or negative discrimination for your application just by putting a particular length of time in. If I can just hijack this question and answer it, there was another one about specifying the number of days of week right from the beginning. Again, we will hold you to what you put on the form, and that is just because we are trying to manage, 75 to 80 applicants, people going on the scheme, offered places. And so in order to make sure we maximize our budget and the spaces available on all the scheme, that's one of the reasons we ask for how long you want to do the scheme and how many days you're engaged as well, so that we can make sure that we offer this opportunity to the most people possible from the outset.
Great, thank you, Ben. We have a question about being assigned a tutor or a supervisor at the Turing. Do we get assigned a tutor or a supervisor?
So I guess the answer straight up is sort of no, not in the way that you might imagine a supervisor or tutor being assigned to your PhD project. So remember, you are not coming to do someone else's work. You are doing your PhD project and continuing on your doctoral clock as well. So that, I think there was another question about, do I need to extend my PhD and funding? So the idea of the enrichment scheme is that it is done with the clock running on your PhD. So it is not extra time. You get top up funding, but that is additional money, but not additional time to do your PhD. And it is really important to understand that. That you are expected to be registered as a student and progressing with your PhD while you're on the enrichment. Now, what you can do is find mentors or perhaps like second supervisors in your locations that will be able to support you while you're on the scheme. So in Turing Central, there is a mentorship scheme that we are developing. So you're putting groups with one of the senior academics that sort of help guide you and encourage you while you're there. I think at Bristol and Leeds, there will be a little bit more of a hands-on approach. So you'll probably have an allocated single Turing fellow who you'll be able to go and talk to during your time. But a lot of that interaction will be driven by you and how much you want from that as well. And that will vary from person to person. And that's why we don't kind of allocate a project supervisor in a very definite sense. So I'm not sure, B, if you've got any experience of from your cohort, how people work that through.
So a lot of people only started the collaborations. It was a mix. Some people went to the Turing already with a collaboration in mind and actually contacted the collaborators before starting the scheme. And then some people waited until they got to the Turing to meet some lecturers, some academics that would be in the Turing, and then after that, after meeting them in person, did they ask for a collaboration or offer their help on the project or something. So it's really a mix, and you might end up working with people from all over the country, which I think is one of the cool parts of this. You don't necessarily need to. My collaborator, my supervisor at the Turing was in Birmingham, and I only saw him, I didn't see him every day, but he was actively helping me. So and I contacted him before starting my scheme. So that's the experience that I had.
Thank you, Beatriz. We have a question about the enrichment scheme being open only to PhD students Or is it also open to other doctoral students, such as those undertaking a DBA? I would say only doctoral PhD students, unless I am wrong.
I think the best thing to do if you're in that position would be to contact us. What the scheme in the Institute is based on is research. So if you're doing research, then there might be an opportunity for that. So I would advise you, if you are the person that's sending that question, to perhaps drop an email through to the academic recruitment inbox and arrange to perhaps have a talk around what your PhD is covering and whether it would be suitable to do that. Because in these days, there's so much flexibility around this. I think there was another question later on about working in a very interdisciplinary fashion already. Should you apply with a media background or from a data background? Again, the answer is just to make it clear why you're coming to the Turing. Traditionally, in a university application context, interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary projects are viewed weaker. The Turing tends to favor those working in interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary contexts as well. So it's not essential, but if you're in that, then just make sure that comes through in the application so that we can see what you're doing and how you imagine that fitting in with the enrichment cohorts and with the Institute itself.
Thank you, Ben. What is the maximum age to apply for the enrichment scheme? There's no maximum age as long as you're in an active research phase and you're enrolled in a at a UK university doing a PhD program. You will be fine. We're receiving quite a lot of questions, which is great. Would you encourage us to look over the Turing's archive of projects, or is it not really going to support our application? I find myself looking through the list of projects and people leading them, but often read over an interesting project only to find out the project is marked as completed.
You can look over them to find out what type of things have been done at the Institute and whether your project would be aligned with that, particularly if maybe you don't consider yourself a data science, but have come to that realization that you're using data science or AI applications. I think the key is as well, we're not looking for people to come in and contribute to ongoing projects necessarily. That's not the primary goal. The primary goal is to enrich your current doctoral research. And so if you find there is an alignment, it might be worth reaching out to a named fellow on that and just saying, are there any current projects like this? And then you might be able to include that information in your application. But we also, it's good to see if you identify people to work with in your applications, but it's not essential as well. And that's a really important thing that we need to bring across. And like Bea said, some people came in with those connections already, other people arrived and developed those. And we took a decision a couple of years ago that for those maybe outside of the Turing University Partner Network, we don't want to disadvantage you by insisting you have named people that you're already in contact with to come and work on. But it is good if you're aware of the type of work that's going on so that you can sort of see if your work aligns in that general ethos of research that's going on at the Institute and its partners.
Thank you. I see a question about students studying outside, well, international students. Is there any way for students from outside UK universities to be considered for this program? It is one of the eligibility criteria that you need to be enrolled in a doctoral program at a UK university. If you're not enrolled in a UK university, unfortunately, you won't be able to participate in the program, in the scheme just yet. I believe there are some workings, there's a plan about expanding the enrichment scheme in the future for make it more international and available to students who are not enrolled in a UK university. Is that correct, Ben?
Possibly in the future, yes. You can imagine, I'm sure, on the call that anything involving international work, given the lack of preparedness for Brexit, is all up in the air at the moment. So I wouldn't rely on that at the moment. The kind of core criteria for the scheme is that you're studying at a UK university for a doctoral level qualification.
There's another question about the locations. Although I'm a PhD student at the University of Leeds, but I live in Manchester, would I be considered for the enrichment scheme in Leeds? It makes sense that you applied for Leeds if you're not already familiar with the community there. If you are, then you would get more benefit and you will be able to enrich your research even more if you choose another location, so Bristol or London.
I think I'd agree with that. What we didn't want to happen is everyone already in Bristol and Leeds to apply for that scheme and just be there doing what they were already doing. But we also realized that you might be at one of those universities, or like in this case in the question, and not integrated with that community, in which case there might be a case for making that. Just on those locations, I really want to emphasize as well to everyone that the quality of your application will be evaluated first. And once we have decided on those applications that are the best and they're going to go forward, then we will start looking at the location preference after that. So your choice of location will not impact on the initial decision about the quality of your application. And that's really important to highlight, because we want to make sure that everyone selected reaches the sort of minimum or the standard that we set for the review based on the applicants this year.
Thank you, Ben. I saw another question about references. Will you accept a recommendation from a corporate research lab? I would say no. Well, we ask a second referee to provide an academic reference. So I would say it would be better to just try and get somebody within the department where you study to submit a reference for you. Can we choose more than one location? The answer is yes. You will see from the application form that you have multiple choices. You can choose more than one.
For that question, if you say you'll go somewhere, then you may get that as an offer, and that may be the only offer that you get. So if you're willing to go anywhere, tick all three boxes, and then if your application is a good enough quality, you will be offered one of those. But like I said, this is the first year we're trying remote applications. We're not sure what the demand levels are going to be. And so we're sort of keeping it quite flexible in terms of how we offer those later on. And we hope you can bear with us as we start this exciting phase, but slightly unknown phase for us for these remote locations.
There's a good question about meetings. It moved away. It's a question about whether we will need to have mandatory meetings with our supervisors. Oh, I missed it. It moved away. And another, there we go. Will there be mandatory meetings between current supervisors at the university and people at the Turing during the scheme? You will need to check in with your supervisor quite often. So that's why we require to have your supervisor on board when you apply for the scheme. We will also have check-ins with the academic services, I'm pretty sure. And then I will leave it to Mishka and Ben to answer anything that I'm not answering, anything that I'm missing.
I don't think there's much to add. It's good to see your supervisor. It's good to be supervised on your project, and usually we expect that to continue. I think hopefully things are much more used to working remotely now as well, and so a lot of the students would just get on a video conference anyway and talk to their supervisor. there is this travel fund as well for the students, which can be used to go and visit your home university, because we understand, like, if you're coming down from Newcastle, a train ticket return can be 200 quid. And so we're not expecting you to have to pay that. And that's why some of that funding is there. We ask people to travel off peak where possible to maximize that. But we've also in the past allowed supervisors to come and visit you in London if that would be tied in with their work as well. And we presume that will work the same between those other courses. So stay in touch, because and I'll say it again, you're working on your PhD, and so your supervisor wants you to keep moving forward on that, but you're enriching this with these other areas as well.
Fantastic. I would say 2 more questions, because I'm also mindful about the time. There's one about accommodation. I read somewhere that you get access to housing from UCL. Is that still the case? We do share a list of accommodations and options that you may take a look at. And I believe, yeah, last year some students stayed at UCL, Ben?
I think we gave access to the University of London housing service before, so it's not UCL, it's different. And I don't think there is an arrangement with UCL, so that's probably a little bit of fake news on that, unless B knows otherwise, but I don't think so.
And go ahead.
I was just gonna say that most people, I don't remember anyone actually going for the university accommodations, but at the same time, I don't know where everyone lived. I'm not that creepy, just a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that we've actually moved away from using that service for our doctoral students, because there are other available services now, but there is some support that's given in terms of where you can go to find quality landlords that will be able to put you up for the time that you're down.
Yeah.
There's another question about the opportunity to join the scheme remotely. This specific candidate is saying that they cannot join the scheme in October 2021, for example. They would be able to do it in September, so the start date doesn't really work for them. Is it possible to join the scheme remotely? I would say no, because we do value the fact that you can interact face-to-face when it will be possible, hopefully soon, on campus at Bristol, Leeds, and at the Turing HQ. And yeah, I mean, do consider the other start dates as well, in case you can make those.
And there was a question as well on like having to go and do field work during the time as well. Ideally, you would try and plan the enrichment around that so that you wouldn't be away while you're on that. So again, that might be the type of query that it's worth just dropping an email directly to get a bit of clarity on whether it would be eligible or not in that case. If I can take another question, we've had this one at the top actually. I think it's really important, and it was 2 parts. So is there any way of attaining more detail on the training program? I think, Mishka, we can probably put up a rough timetable of at least what we've offered in previous years. The training evolves so much year on year that it's sometimes hard to have an exact copy of what's going to come up. But we will put that onto the Enrichment website in the next couple of days for you to reference. And then there was a second question: to what extent are objectives set? And I hope we've covered this already, but really I think it's actually a highlight to flag up that you have a huge amount of flexibility in what you want to use enrichment for. And that is both the challenge and the greatness of the scheme. The challenge is that you have to kind of take a step up in that maturity as a researcher, because you are managing your time independently a lot more than you would have been before. But that brings with it this flexibility to start pursuing what you are interested in and developing the skills that you need to advance your research career into the future. And while I'm talking, there's the other upvoted question there: how competitive is the scheme? I think last year we had about 300 applications for the 50 places that we allocated. This year, the scheme is sort of split between some people who are reapplying from the cancelled scheme this last year because of the pandemic, and the new cohort coming in on top of that. So it is very competitive, but we don't apply rules onto that. So you're not more likely to get a place just because you're in your final year of your PhD. It is the best proposals and the best ways of describing why enrichment will benefit the doctoral process that are going to go through that review process.
Fantastic. I went through all the remaining questions and I see that we have pretty much answered all of them. There are some questions that are very specific to your cases. And for those, I would invite you guys to reach out to us and we can quickly reply to them via email. If you, Ben, Mishka, and Bea, don't see any other question that you would like to answer or that we have not answered.
Just so there's one question here on, for those at a London university, would it negatively affect the application to only apply to the London location? No, not at all. And it's not designed to have these locations as a way to drag you out from the capital, although that's a big political theme at the moment and a great thing to do, you know, if you'd like to do that. Just apply where you could see yourselves easily being able to carry out the enrichment scheme. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you've got specific questions on locations though, please do get in touch because we can either answer the question or forward it through. There's also a question on collaboration with researchers at the Institute or the whole Turing network. No, you don't need to be based in one of the Turing partner universities. And in fact, one of the great things about the enrichment scheme is that it has always been open to any UK university. And we particularly like seeing people coming from outside of the partnership. The Turing is a national institute and we're meant to be serving the whole of the UK system. That tends to get focused in on our partner universities, sometimes just because the communication channels are better there. But we will welcome anyone from any UK university that is working on a project. And that's one of the other reasons why we're particularly excited that Leeds and Bristol are involved, because we know that there are regional networks, the GW4 group in Bristol area and the North 8 group as well. And so hopefully we will get some more applications from universities outside of that partnership as well. And I think that that would be a really great thing for the scheme as a whole.
Thank you, Ben. If you want to answer one last question, I see that there's somebody asking why we decided not to have any interviews.
Yeah, a really good question. So that partly it was a matter of scale. So originally the Turing was running a doctoral scheme as well, and we had one set of interviews for that. One of the other reasons now is you, to be eligible for the scheme, have already been accepted onto a UK doctoral program, and therefore your quality is already really high. And so we put our trust in the fact that being accepted onto that program is a mark of your quality. And therefore what we're looking for more is the way that you describe and can think through how your project will be served by your time at the Turing. And we're not necessarily looking for those other things that tend to come out in the interview process. This way we're able to do really good paper-based reviews, and we think that it keeps the bias down and allows us to select a really diverse cohort of people for engagement on the enrichment scheme. And it's worked really well for us over the last few years.
Fantastic. I see one last question about, again, the recording. Yes, we are recording this webinar and you will be able to watch the recording. You will receive the link to the recording in an email that we will send out right after the webinar, but you will also find a link to the recording if you visit the enrichment scheme webpage on the Alan Turing Institute website. Fantastic. I think we did a great job and replied to most questions. I would like to thank everybody, Ben, Mishka, Beatriz, Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, all of you, for asking so many questions, for all your interest, and for joining us in this webinar today. And I hope it was helpful and informative for all of you. And again, if you have any questions, please do drop us an email at academic-recruitment@turing.ac.uk, and we'll be able to answer you as soon as possible. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely day.